The Davenport by Jack Ritchie. "How long has your husband been missing?" Detective Sergeant Whittier asked. Mrs. Brenner had angry, dark eyes. "Since this morning at 10 o'clock. She pointed to the Davenport upon which Whittier sat. "He has Wednesdays off, and he was lying right there like he always does. I went downstairs to get the mail out of her box in the vestibule, and when I got back he was gone." Whittier put that down in his notebook. "Have you checked with friends?" "Of course. None of them have seen them. Besides, I went over his things in the closet, and all his clothes are still there. All of them. It's freezing outside, and he certainly wouldn't go out without taking at least his top coat and hat." She indicated a pair of shoes beside the Davenport. "Besides, those are his shoes. He certainly wouldn't leave the building without him, and none of his other pairs is missing." Whittier found himself stifling a yawn. "Strange," he thought. "I wasn't the least bit sleepy when I came here, but now I can hardly keep my eyes open." He forced his mind back to Harry Brenner. Very likely Harry had yielded to a sudden impulse to walk out on his wife, stockinged feet and all. The odds were that he'd be back as soon as whatever money he took with him ran out. "Would you know how much money your husband carried with him?" She shrugged. "Henry didn't believe in carrying a lot of cash with him. He always gave me his paycheck, and if he really needed anything, all he had to do was ask for it, and usually I'd see that he got it. He wanted it that way." "Of course," Whittier thought. He stifled another yawn. "Could you give me a description of your husband?" "He was about average size, thinning at the top, a little overweight. He was wearing one of those white shirts and brown slacks." "Have you talked to the building superintendent? Perhaps he's seen your husband." "He hasn't. We even searched the laundry room, the storage locker, the whole basement. Henry isn't anywhere." "Couldn't he have dropped in at one of your neighbors, somebody in the building?" She rejected that. "We don't know anyone in the building, more than to nod to. We mind our own business, and they mind theirs. Something's happened to Henry. I just know it." "Perhaps he has friends you don't know about," Whittier thought. "Perhaps he's in a poker game somewhere in the building and forgot about the time. Maybe there's even another woman." Whittier stirred, vaguely uneasy. Somehow he had the strange impression that Henry was close. Very close. "Have you searched this apartment?" "Yes, I thought he might be trying to frighten me, but he isn't anywhere." She glared at the Davenport. The minute Henry got home from work, he'd take off his shoes and just lie there. Most of the time he didn't even bother to look at the television or even to read. He just went to sleep. I wonder what he ever saw in just lying there day after day. Sometimes I thought he'd turn into a Davenport himself. Whittier touched one of the cushions beside him. Yes, it was really quite a comfortable piece of furniture. One had the overwhelming impulse to lie down. The Davenport felt almost as though it were a living, contented thing. Mrs. Brenner moved closer and stared narrowed eyes. "That's not our Davenport." Whittier looked at the cushion again. "It isn't?" "It looks like our Davenport, but it's different. I can feel it. It's not ours." "Where did it come from?" Whittier sighed. "Why not outer space? It's a creature invading the earth disguised as a Davenport. Perhaps there are thousands of them now on earth. No home is complete without one." Whittier smiled at another thought. Suppose Henry had for some reason wandered out into the hall and returned to what he thought was his apartment and was now waiting for his wife to come back in the mail, or sleeping on some strange couch. After all, these were furnished apartments, and all of them probably looked somewhat alike. Mrs. Brenner seemed to think of something. "Do you suppose that Henry might have left a note or something explaining everything in the mailbox downstairs?" "It's a possibility," Whittier said. "Why don't you go look?" Whittier watched her leave and then yawned. There was something incredibly soporific about this Davenport. You felt that you really must lie down. He stretched out and closed his eyes. It was delightful just to lie there and think of nothing at all. Nothing at all. His breathing slowly deepened, and after a few minutes more he fell asleep. A minute passed. Another. The back of the Davenport slowly extended itself and folded gently over the sleeping man, and quietly ate him.